There you go. I like it. Cool. All right. So there's Chip Dodd with the EO Southeastern Virginia chapter. And we're here at the Because headquarters, which is the largest Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency mining operation in North America, and second only to Bitmain in China, if I remember correctly. So we had done an EO event here, and it was this room was packed. We did a virtual tour, and Tom basically gave us behind-the-scenes access. And why keep it just with our chapter? I decided to share it with the world. So we're going to record this and put it on the EO Learning platform, as well as any attendees that are going to be participating today will be able to participate in the Q&A, ask questions, and we took a bunch of videos. We're going to do virtual tours using the video that I took, so this should be a lot of fun. But Tom is the founder, or one of the founders of Because, and the cool thing about this presentation, he's tailored it for entrepreneurs. So we're going to talk a lot about the business model and how to scale up a company from an idea to huge in a very short period of time, which takes a lot of funding and capital and things of that nature. So without further ado, I'll let you get started.
Thanks, Jim. We actually refer to ourselves as 6-year overnight successes. So we're scaling up rapidly. How do you want to start? Do you want to start with the virtual tour, or do you want to start?
Let's start with your slides, I guess.
Okay, let's go with that. The first question, I think, when you start a company, there we go, is sort of, why would you make an investment? Why would you invest your time? Why would you invest your resources, your capital, whatever? So we looked at 6 years ago, 6-year overnight success, right? Was when I first became aware of blockchain and Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And at the time, really, blockchain and Bitcoin were cryptocurrency, and there weren't 1,500 other cryptocurrencies. BTC was it. And so we looked at it and we said, well, you know, this looks a lot like the beginning of the internet. Well, the foundational principle of the internet, or the foundational protocol of the internet, is something called TCP/IP, Transmission Control Protocol, Internet Networking Protocol. And yet, if you ask 100 people what the internet was, 100 people could give you an answer. But if you ask 100 people what TCP/IP was, probably none of them, unless they're IT geeks like myself, could tell you what TCP/IP is, right? And so one principle is that nobody invested in TCP/IP, but a lot of people invested in Google and Facebook and the things that you could build or exploit using TCP/IP, right? And we think that blockchain is the same way. I was up at a conference, or down at a conference. I was in Miami for a conference for blockchain folks about 3 months ago, and I was the heretic in the crowd because I was like, blockchain is the crappiest of all possible databases, except for one use case. The use case is, if you don't know me and I don't know you, but we have to trust each other, it's the only technological solution we have to have transactions where the strong encryption enforces that trust. But other than that, use Oracle, use Microsoft SQL, whatever. But for that particular use case, it's good. So we said, okay, it's going to be the internet of value. That seems pretty clear to us. And then we started to think about what are the use cases where people would employ this new technology. And we said, a new technology has to be at least 10 times better than an existing technology for people to switch. If it's not 10 times better, switching's hard. I'm familiar with the dollar. I'll just continue to use that, right? And so if you were going to invent money today, like in money being two things, a medium of exchange and a store of value, would your first choice be pieces of paper with portraits of dead presidents on them? And you go, that is it, man. That is the technology that we're going to employ. Probably not. Probably you could do a little bit better than that. So that's probably not your first choice. For those of you unfamiliar with it, maybe you are. Everybody in the crowd today is a business person, so probably used to trying this deal where you have to move funds around. I've got to send people money. People have to send me money. Typically, the way you do that is an account-to-account transfer. Send them a check, or use ACH or SWIFT. All of them are slow, costly, and fraught with peril. What I mean by fraught with peril is, and if you don't believe me, talk to your banker about sort of what the chargeback capabilities with ACH are, or what the chargeback capabilities with SWIFT are, when you really think you've got your money. I think Nigeria built an entire national economy on the fact that ACH and SWIFT had a lag to them, and so they could get you to like, hey, you know, if you just send me $1,000, I'll send you $1 million, and here's the check, and you'd be like, you go deposit it. They essentially make their money on the reversal of the float. Sorry. So a whole new method of managing supply chain. Imagine, if you will, that when you buy something as an input or for your company, right? You need you're buying sort of sub-assemblies from China, and then you're doing final assembly here in the United States for a product. And I'll give you an example. I was working with a company called Crossrope. This is a guy who makes a modular jump rope system. He would buy the different weighted ropes in China. He would buy the handles in China. They would all be shipped here in various quantities in various containers. And when they got here, his team would assemble them, package them, and then ship them. Right? What if you could see the status of your product at each step in the supply chain? When it left manufacturing, when it got on the truck in China, when it went from the truck in China to the train in China, when it went from the train in China back to another truck, when it went from the other truck to a ship, when it went from the ship, when it finally arrived here in the ship, finally when it got on a truck here in the United States, and when you, today, you know, you can do some of that with UPS, but that's not sort of global. What if you had this integrated global supply chain where everybody was logging who owned what at what point on a blockchain somewhere? And so for you to be able to see your stuff, that was doable. It would make transparency much greater, and it would make fraud much lower. It would be a great improvement to the global supply chain. What about when you want to register a car, or get title to a car, or title to a piece of real estate? Now, it's clear the city, the state, Uncle Sam want their cut when we engage in a transaction. But that aside, why do I have to go to VDOT to sell you my car? Why can't the title be online? And if I want to sell it to you, I just sell it to you. And I transfer title online, and I could do it from the comfort of my house without waiting in line at VDOT. And we could even rig up a system where Uncle Sam got his cut, right? We're not trying to cut the tax man out, but why not make that process more efficient? It's really interesting to me. I've lived in my house 30 years. I've refinanced it twice, and both times I had to do a title search on a house I've owned for 30 years, which is crazy. Why couldn't we put all of our assets, say real estate, on a blockchain where we know it is, the value of blockchain is that we know it is what it says it is and who owns what. So if we know I own a piece of real estate, then when I sell it to somebody, I can transfer title on the blockchain. I shouldn't have to go through a title search. It should be clear title, just knowing what it is, right? And that's what the blockchain is good for. Now, you guys may say, well, yeah, but what if the blockchain gets hacked? Hasn't happened yet. Billions of dollars a day in transactions. People have tried. It's built on military-grade encryption with something called 256-bit SHA encryption. Same stuff that DoD uses, right? Very, very secure, and that deal of security means it is, you know, when I say I've got a Bitcoin and you a particular Bitcoin, and you don't, what that means is that I have that Bitcoin. And it's really important. One of the great sort of developments of Bitcoin blockchain was that with digital assets like music, if I give you music, generally I still have the music. If I give you a movie or pictures, I still generally have the movie or pictures, right? It's really important with money that when I give it to you that I no longer have, right? That's kind of a big deal, because as soon as I did that, suddenly we have twice as much money. And then when you spent it and I spent it again, then we have 4 times as much money, and that becomes a real problem. So one of the things that blockchain solved was this idea of when I spend money and I give it to you, I no longer have it, now you do, right? So similarly, with assets, if I give you title to car, title to real estate, title to something else, or I want to demonstrate provenance of something, right? It's really important that when party A gives title to party B, party A no longer has title to it, right? But that's really the very thing, the very problem that blockchain solves, right? Has anybody ever wondered why you can't buy a can of soda online? And the answer is really because Visa and MasterCard charge too much, right? They charge maybe 35 cents plus 2% of the transaction, and suddenly a 50-cent soda would cost you $1 online. And so micropayments using credit cards have not really taken off. However, micropayments with cryptocurrency are very valuable. I can sell something for literally, because Bitcoin's divisible down to 8 decimal places, I can sell something that was worth fractions of a penny online. Right? And billing and collections for that would be doable. And so micropayments are open now in a way that weren't previously. Finally, I'm talking to business people. Anybody accept credit cards in your, okay, some of you do. Have you ever had a situation where somebody complained about the service or product that you offered and they charged back their credit card, and suddenly money that you thought you had made, you no longer made? And the onus is on you to demonstrate that you rightfully had that money. You're essentially guilty until proven innocent in that case. So that's expensive and it's fraught with peril. And most companies allow, even with credit cards, a bad debt allowance in their bookkeeping of maybe 3, 4, up to 8%. Right? Well, with Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, it's different. Credit cards, debit cards are what we call a pull system, meaning that if you give me your credit card number and the code on the back and the expiration date, I can charge your card, charge your card, charge your card until the card is full or empty, depending on how you look at it, right? That's a pull system. I can essentially reach into your card and reach into your account and pull money out of it, right? Cryptocurrency is a completely different architecture. It's what we call a pull or a push technology. That means that for you to give me money, you have to send it to me. There's no way for me to reach into your credit card or your account and pull money out. You have to send it to me. Now, that's good, right? What's equally good, particularly for vendors, is that once somebody's pushed money to me, it's mine. I can verify it's there. There's no chargebacks. They can't reach back into my account 30 days later and pull it out of my account, right? So from a vendor standpoint, it's better. That 35 cents plus 2%, whatever you get charged by Visa or MasterCard, the transaction fees on cryptocurrency are much lower, right? So if you're not using cryptocurrency for international remittance, supply chain correspondence, and even in a day-to-day transaction, you're spending too much in your transactions, they're going too slow, and they're ripe with problems with chargebacks and other things. So the question then becomes, based on that thing, do you think it's 10 times better? We looked at that and went, oh, we think it's at least 10 times better. Can you go on to the next slide, Chip? Sure. And it's not just us. Around the world today, in the last 30 days roughly, since we prepared this slide, there were $722 billion in cryptocurrency transactions in 30 days. Okay? Now, some of you may find that shocking, like shockingly huge, like, oh my God, I had no idea. Why hadn't I heard of this? Here's an interesting thing, and I was telling Chip just before this. We invented cryptocurrency, we invented Bitcoin in the United States. Well, we think. Nobody exactly knows who Satoshi is, but we were using cryptocurrency in the United States before anybody else, so there was some United States sort of affiliation there. But here's what's interesting about it. This was about 8 years ago, and the rest of the world looked at it and said, well, this is way better than our national currency. And we, in the United States, looked at it and said, oh, we've got the dollar. It would be almost as if we had invented the internet in the United States, and the rest of the world said that internet thing was really good. Remember earlier I said it was like the internet of money, right? But we in the United States said, we've got AOL. We're good with it. And you guys laugh, but that's essentially what's gone on with Bitcoin, because what you can see here, or what we'll see here in a minute in a subsequent slide, is how much, if you were to compare, say, the GDP of the United States versus our Bitcoin adoption against the GDP and Bitcoin adoption of other countries, call it the per GDP or per capita sort of adoption of Bitcoin, we have not in the United States embraced cryptocurrency the way other countries have. Now, we'll talk about why that might be in a minute, but let's go on to the next slide real quick. So let me give you one last point on our investment thesis, and that's this. Most governments, particularly the United States, have outsourced, the government has outsourced its responsibility for the coining and printing of money in the Constitution to a private entity we know as the Federal Reserve. Essentially, they've outsourced that. They've outsourced it for 100 years, right? During that time, the United States has run up $115 trillion in unfunded liabilities, right? For you and me, that's $453,000 in assets per citizen that we have as a country, but $943,000 in liabilities. And if you find that, as a business person, if you look at that and go, that entity is bankrupt. That was sort of our read on it. And we currently pay $351 billion a year in interest every year on the debt that we've run up. Not on the unfunded liabilities. The debt that we recognize is about $21 trillion. But $115 trillion also includes things like Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, liabilities that we certainly incurred, but that we don't yet necessarily have to pay for. We haven't funded either, right? That's an effective interest rate of 1.6%. 351 billion on 21 trillion in debt. The Federal Reserve, though, is actively raising interest rates. They've got a stated goal of getting sort of the 10-year T-bill to be about 3.5%. So the question becomes, when you're currently paying $351 billion in interest, what happens when that becomes $700 billion in interest?
You know, taxes are going to have to go up, or
Interesting you'd say that. So let's think about your ways to sort of pay for that, because that's another $350 billion on top of what we're paying now. That's $350 billion more per year, right? So you got a couple ways, 3 ways that I can think of to pay for it. The first one is you could charge everyone more taxes. Does anybody here believe they're not paying enough in taxes? Okay, so probably you can't raise taxes because any politician that would suggest it would be voted out of office, and we'd find somebody who would be like, I'm going to be great to you. We're not only going to not raise taxes, we're going to lower taxes, like President Trump.
Borrow more money.
Or you could borrow more money, which is in effect not just borrowing more money, but printing more money, right? Because so we could. But before we get to that, because that's the path I think we're going to go down, and I'll give some evidence for that in a minute. But the other thing you could do is you could say we could grow our way out of it, right? Because if you can grow the economy, then you don't have to raise the effective tax rate, but you'll still collect more tax revenue. That's sort of the whole Laffer curve thing, right? And so that would be good, except I believe that you can neither tax your way nor grow your way out of that number. Out of that number, right? Just my own personal opinion. So your final choice is to essentially print your way out of that problem, right? So we can tax our way, we can grow our way, or we can print our way. Frankly, I think that would be the way that most people would find most acceptable. My evidence for saying that starts in Nigeria, where you can actually find the Nigerian $10 trillion note that'll buy you about like a loaf of bread because of the way they've inflated their currency. And it goes to Venezuela, where today people can't afford to eat because the value of their currency has become so debased, right? And then it goes to the United States in 2008. Can you go to the next slide? No. Or we'll stay here. So before we get to that, let me tell you let's talk about who uses. This is what I alluded to earlier. I want you to look at numbers 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Why do you think the UK might be number 3?
What is that?
This is the people who use Bitcoin the most for transactions.
Brexit.
You're exactly right. So one of the things that people have said, now imagine that Venezuela is number 4 on the list. That is so counterintuitive. They're not the 4th largest economy in the world. They're probably not the 40th largest economy in the world. But they're the 4th largest user of Bitcoin in the world. Why do you think that might be? Because their national currency sucks, right? Okay, so I think what you can get from this list is the idea that citizens of specific countries have said to themselves, my national currency sucks. I'm going to use some other way of transacting business that the government can't debase, right? So then you got to ask yourself the questions, under what circumstance would people in the United States adopt cryptocurrency en masse, right? Could you go to the next slide, please? Are you guys sort of ready for this? For a moment? Like, this is a red pill, blue pill. No. Like, if they tell you the rest of the story, you'll go home at night, scream into your pillow, okay? If you don't want to do that, this is your chance, right? So in the United States, we have profound propaganda that we all know, sort of, we tacitly acknowledge, but we sort of buy into. It's like the red pill, blue pill, right? And so here's the piece of it. We never, ever, ever talk about the dollar going up or down in value. We only talk about the asset going up or down in value. Today, gold went up in price. Today, oil went down in price. That is not what happened, okay? An ounce of gold is an ounce of gold, will always be an ounce of gold, and has for a billion years always been an ounce of gold, right? It doesn't change in value. You can fill teeth with it, you can make electronics with it, you can make jewelry with it. It will always be an ounce of gold, and it will always be worth the utility of what you can get out of an ounce of gold, okay? We should ever, never, never, ever talk about gold or oil or any natural substance going up or down in value. What we should talk about instead is the fact that you had to deploy more dollars in order to get an ounce of gold, or you had to deploy less dollars to get an ounce of gold, right? The dollars are actually what shift in value. They either go up or down, depending upon what? The money supply, how much money the Federal Reserve is forcing into the economy, or conversely, how much money, liquidity they're taking out of the economy, right? And you might be looking at me now like I just grew 2 heads, but bear with me for a minute, because this is the red pill, blue pill thing. Let me give you some sort of anecdotal proof. Can you go to the next slide for that? All right. So in 2008, our banking industry blew up the world economy. Some of you are old enough to remember that. Some of you had a front row seat on that, okay? When we did that, we put the people in charge of fixing the problem who caused the problem. Remember Tim Geithner? These were people out of Goldman Sachs who had caused the problem in the first place. But we said, hey, you guys are the only ones smart enough to fix the problem. What do you want to do? They said, we want the Federal Reserve to print enough money so that they can buy, after they had cut interest rates to 0, we want the Federal Reserve to print enough money, that is the US government to borrow enough, because, oh, by the way, let me take a dog leg down a rabbit hole for just a minute. The way the money supply works is this. So we outsource the Federal Reserve, the monetary supply, but we can't get around the pesky Constitution. So the Department of Treasury prints the dollars into existence and then sells them to the Federal Reserve for the cost of printing. So imagine if I sell you a sheet of $100 bills for about $1.25, because that's what it costs to print that sheet, but you get to loan it back to me at face value. That's a hell of a deal if you can get it, but that's the way it works. So what they said was, we want the federal government to take on it ultimately became about $4.5 trillion worth of additional debt. And we want you to essentially spend that into the economy by buying up debt. buying up corporate bonds and just essentially inject as much liquidity into the economy. That'll solve the problem. So we called it QE1. And that took the Federal Reserve from a $700 billion balance in the balance sheet to $2.1 trillion. And while the dollar was plummeting in value, suddenly we started to sort of exacerbate things. We drove the cost of, this is in oil, by the way. We'll get to gold in a minute, because you'd say, well, it only worked for that. Maybe it didn't work for everything, but we could go through it. But essentially, these periods match up to that, and that's straight out of Wikipedia. You don't have to believe me. You can go and do your own research. But if you do believe me, what you'll see is that as we engaged in quantitative easing, you'll note that this is up and to the right, meaning oil became increasingly more expensive. You may remember that in 2008, it was about $2.25 to buy a gallon of gas. And then for about 5 years, the price of gas went up to about $4.35 a gas. Now, we never talked about the fact that the dollar lost half of its purchasing power. Blue pill, red pill, right? We only talked about, my gosh, gas is getting really expensive. It was still just a gallon of gas, right? What changed was how many dollars you had to give somebody to give you a gallon of gas in return. Why? Because the Federal Reserve was essentially flying over cities in helicopters and dumping money out of the windows by the bushel basket to try and sort of save. Now, by the way, I'm not saying that that was a bad thing to do. That may have been the only way to save the economy. But that is what they did, and to understand sort of what the impact that had was on the price of things, right? Because we would tend to say, what happened in Zimbabwe, what happened in Nigeria, what happened in Venezuela, what happened in Greece, that could never happen here. But it did. We lived through it, but nobody talks about it in those terms, right? What happened was it cost increasingly more to buy the same thing until they stopped printing money. And you say, well, that's true of oil. Did it happen for anything else? Chip, can you go to the next slide? It also happened for gold. Same effect. We printed more money, we printed more money, we printed more money. So the people who had gold demanded more of our money in order to exchange it for gold until we stopped printing it. Gold started at about $1,000 an ounce. It went up to $1,900 an ounce. It fell off back to about $1,200 an ounce. Oil went from about $40 a barrel, $50 a barrel, all the way up to $120 a barrel, then it fell back to $40 or $50 a barrel. Today it's about 60 or 70. There's some supply and demand things in here that conflate things, but for the most part, it's directly correlated to the supply of dollars.
Those dollars didn't come out of the economy, though, correct? So they're still in circulation.
Sort of. So what happened was in October of 2014, the Federal Reserve stopped quantitative easing. That is, they stopped pushing money into the economy. They have not, to any great degree, reduced their balance sheet as of right now. But what happened was all of our trading partners said to themselves, well, if that was good for the United States, that would be good for us. So Bank of Japan embarked on massive quantitative easing. Made us look like amateurs by comparison. Central Bank of Europe, same thing. Bank of China, same thing. So what happened was, we didn't really pull a lot of liquidity out of the market since then, but our trading partners devalued their currency by more. And so by comparison, the dollar gained in value is essentially what happened. Because it's all comparative, right? So if you double the number of value of dollars, but I triple the number of yen, right? Then the dollar goes up in value comparatively. It's really kind of a weird thing, but that's essentially what happened. So we engaged in a currency war that was sort of unpublicized, and our trading partners were like, screw you. And in October of 2014, we declared a truce. We said, we're going to stop QE. Japan, Europe, China, they continued on their QE programs. And recently, in the last year or so, the Federal Reserve has attempted to raise interest rates. And the way you'd raise interest rates is essentially by pulling some of the liquidity out. What they've done, though, is those assets, many of the assets that they bought, the way they pull liquidity out of the economy is those assets that were, like, say I have a $1 million bond from GE sitting on my balance sheet. Well, if I sell somebody that bond, what I do is I pull $1 million of liquidity out of the economy. You follow? And so these are what are called federal open market operations. And so they'll either sell something to pull liquidity out, or they'll buy something which pushes liquidity in. They embarked in 2010 on buying corporate bonds and things, which pushed a lot of liquidity into the market, and now they're engaged in selling it, trying to reduce their balance sheet. But where they were increasing their balance sheet by $80 billion a month during QE3, I think now they're trying to reduce their balance sheet by $250 million a year. It's going to take them a while to spend all that stuff down, right? So that's sort of what really happened. Now, what we had to ask ourselves, if you can go to the next slide, is as the dollar becomes less valuable, things produced with dollars become more, demand more dollars in exchange. Gas becomes more expensive, gold becomes more. That was sort of all the data I gave you. So we're looking at this at the peak of that, because I told you we came to this 6 years ago, 2012. That's when QE madness was going on, right? And we said the associated becomes more. We said we think cryptocurrency becomes money, and we think it becomes money because it creates new capabilities. It is going to have a natural demand because of its utility. I can shrink my, I can pay my international debts more quickly. And because it's a natural hedge against my national currency. And it does those things so well, we said its success is inevitable. This was sort of, the building you're sitting in is sort of testament to like the thinking we had 6 years ago. So if you go to the next
in the demand for the utility, it's also because it's cheaper to do transactions than the existing utilities that we had prior to crypto.
That's exactly right. So you can do things now that you couldn't before, micropayments, supply chain analysis, the provenance and tracking of assets. Those are things you couldn't do before or you couldn't do as well. But there are also things like you're saying, a typical Visa card transaction, which you can do more cost effectively.
Or if I live in US and I want to send money to my friends in Venezuela,
yes,
you could do it cheaper this way than.
Absolutely. International remittance. So there are about 10 use cases that we looked at and we went, oh, it's way better than the existing systems. This is going to be a thing, right? So this was the analysis we went through before we ever decided to like build a business around it. Was like, is it going to be a thing? And after we did the analysis, we were like, oh, it's going to be a thing. So after you say, oh, this is going to be something, then we had to decide, okay, so what are the businesses and services that we grew up around that thing, and which one made the most sense? Which was the most lucrative and the least obvious, right? We wanted it most lucrative. We wanted to make a lot of money. Least obvious. We didn't want to have a lot of competition to begin with, right? And so that was the analysis. Is it going to be a thing? If it's going to be a thing, what kind of business can we grow around it? And we identified 10 use cases, and we identified 8 businesses. And of the 8 businesses, we picked a particular one. And let me give you some of the other ones so you understand what I'm talking about when we business. We looked at like point of sale, right? Like, do you want to build Bitcoin cash registers? Which sounds weird, but people have built Bitcoin ATMs, right? People have gotten into the ATM business, the point of sale. Do you want to get into the Bitcoin banking business? Do you want to be a bank, right? So there were like 8 of these things where we said, these are things that have grown up around currency, and they're going to have to grow up around Bitcoin in order for Bitcoin to be successful. Which one should be engaged?
And there's clearinghouses, I guess, that allow 2 people that want to use dollars to flip it into Bitcoin and back out again? Or
those are more of exchanges, but clearinghouses is an interesting business case. And we'll talk about that more because that's one of our businesses. So then we looked at what sort of existed in the Bitcoin world. And we said, well, it's disjointed. And if I want to do things like mine and then turn the things that I mine into capital or cash, and then I'm not going to mine everything all at once. So what about the things I mine in 9 months from now? How can I assure that it's going to have a certain value? And I need to hedge. And how do I engage in hedging? And what is the clearing mechanism? And who holds on to it during those transactions? can I loan it? Is there a money market for Bitcoin? I mean, there were a lot of things that didn't exist then, certainly, and don't exist to any great degree today. And in fact, if they exist today, you have to have accounts with like 4 or 5 different companies to get those services to work. We said to ourselves, what if we could put all of those services under one roof such that it made it really convenient for the end user, right? That was sort of our thing. So we said there's a lack of infrastructure in jurisdictions with significant legal protections. What does that mean? It means today if somebody says, oh, I want to have a mining operation, I ought to put it in Inner Mongolia. That some guy in Inner Mongolia can show up one day and say, thank you for the donation of your mining computers. The chances of President Trump showing up here tomorrow and saying, thank you for the donation of your mining computers is relatively low, right? And that's good. What that means is that America, because of transparency, rule of law, et cetera, that people want to do business here, right? So we want to do business here. So how do you do that? And there's a lot of people that would like to get exposure to Bitcoin. Maybe you guys have a 401k plan, maybe you have an IRA, maybe you have a SEP, something like that. You go to your broker and you say, hey, how can I get exposure to Bitcoin? He says, I got nothing for you. Because he's a fiduciary, he can't advise you to put something into something that's an unregulated asset, right? Because then he could get in trouble. So what we figure is that by working within the regulatory framework, then frees up fiduciaries to make that kind of recommendation. We think when that happens, and we think our approval is imminent, when that happens, the price of the whole cryptocurrency ecosystem goes up because now it's more, the utility goes up. And the exchanges that do exist are generally opaque and poorly regulated. The New York Attorney General just put out a report about 3 weeks ago. If you just try NYAG report on derivatives markets, you can read the 45-page report that they did. I can tell you generally, they have an axe to grind because we're a real threat to the banking industry, and New York's the center of banking. So it wasn't positive. But what I did find interesting is that most of the things they were critical of are things that we'd already identified that we're planning to be better at it. So it was actually a resounding endorsement of our business plan and a resounding criticism of our competitors, in our opinion. Can we go to the next slide? So we said we wanted to become a leader in delivering a full life cycle for the digital currency services and financial solutions for the world. And that would include mining, trading, allocation, hedging, and risk management, and custody. So this is what we're building is a full services financial technology firm. Next slide, please. So what does that look like? When I start to, we'll go a little bit more granular. When we say the first and only full stack cryptocurrency ecosystem, now what I explained earlier is you can mine new cryptocurrency, you can exchange it for fiat, you can hedge what you're going to produce in the future. These are all things that you can do with us. And it makes sense that one piece feeds the other, right? So there are synergies between those lines of business. We've negotiated with and got a contract with NASDAQ to use their software as our trading platform. So it's not just us building software in our garage and then testing it on our customers. Not that Silicon Valley would ever do that, but we won't be doing it. We're actually partnered with one of the best names in the trading industry. And it is designed to handle the volumes associated with a full-blown exchange. Right? So hypothetically, back in December when the market's going up and Bitcoin's at $18,000 a Bitcoin, we won't have to stand out in front of the news media and say, you know, you should tell your readers and listeners and viewers that if they were to try and make a withdrawal tomorrow, they might not be able to because the volume's on our exchange. You laugh, one of our competitors did that. So again, we're partnered with one of the best names in the industry, and clearly the software has been tested over 40 years and can handle the volumes. In fact, later on when we do the in-person tour, I can show you the computers that software is going to be running on, because since the last time you were here, those computers have been installed, the software has been loaded, and it's now being tested and configured. We expect to launch that in December. Currently, today, Bitcoin is worth $130 billion in terms of market cap. If, within the next 5 years, Bitcoin would be able to gain parity with gold, that would mean that the value of Bitcoin would have to go, the market cap would have to grow to $4 trillion. If it were to grow to be just equivalent to the dollar, it would have to grow to about $50 trillion. So when we say it's a nascent market with huge growth potential, what if it just got to be as valuable as gold? This is the question we ask ourselves. Go back to the slide and that stuff I told you about earlier. Are the use cases strong enough? Is the utility sufficient? You can see enough people adopting it that the growth could get that big. Yeah.
Tom, just so I understand what you're saying. You're saying the entire market for gold is 4 trillion, and so and Bitcoin's not going to increase in population, or except for at the rate that it goes. So you're suggesting if the entire market value of Bitcoin were 4 trillion.
Yeah, so the way I think about it is this. Usually we think as economists or business people in terms of supply and demand, right? And as demand goes up, generally price goes up. As supply goes up or down, generally price goes up or down. Much has been made about the idea that new Bitcoin is always being created. But what hasn't been said, I think to any great or appreciable degree, is the rate at which it's being created is trivial. There's 17 million Bitcoin in existence, and we are generating about 12 and a half every 10 minutes. Think about that in terms of a percentage of the M1, the monetary supply. Think about that in terms of the percentage of increase. The percentage is smaller and smaller. It's essentially fixed, right? It's 17 million now, and at the end of the year it'll be 17 million, and at the end of next year it'll still be 17 million and something, and a few thousand more, right? So if the supply is essentially fixed and demand goes up, what would you expect price to do?
Sure.
Yeah. So now I would admit to you that it's very volatile, right? We think that a derivatives exchange will squeeze that volatility out of the market, but we think that generally the trend has been up and to the right for 9 years. Granted, we ramped up too fast, came back and created a bubble. But in general, we've gone from 10 cents to $6,000, $6,500, right? And so the trend, absent some bubbles and crashes, the trend has been up and to the right.
I don't know if this is the right time to ask this question, but the case for cryptos you've made very well. I mean, it totally makes sense, and obviously fiat currencies have all the problems that you just talked about. But you also had a chart up there with all the different cryptos that are being developed, and so the demand could be on cryptos, but not necessarily Bitcoin. It could be one of the other cryptos that should have a better, faster, more efficient utility.
Yes.
Are you convinced that it will be Bitcoin?
No.
Or, okay.
No. The first thing in investing is to admit you know nothing. The first principle, and I knew nothing, okay? What I do know is that before there was Google, there was Alta Vista. And before there was Facebook, there was a number of other social media platforms. Right? We don't know today, and I would argue with him, we don't know today whether Bitcoin is Google, or Alta Vista. We don't know. The market will eventually figure it out, but today, it's the leading coin, right? It's 40% of the overall market cap of all cryptocurrency.
And your company is making a play that they're going to be mining something.
Our mining operation is a play that people are going to be mining something.
Mining, it doesn't matter if it's Bitcoin or whatever. You are the infrastructure.
Every one of our businesses, and I didn't make it clear, but every one of our businesses is a platform play. Right. What I mean by a platform play is I don't mine cryptocurrency myself. My customers do. We provide a platform whereby they can mine cryptocurrency more efficiently. In a fiat, in the spot exchange piece, we don't take a position in any coin. We put buyers and sellers together. We provide a trading platform. For derivatives and clearing, same thing. We don't trade against our customers or for our customers. To the banks in New York, maybe you want to stop doing that. We don't take positions for or against our customers. we let them decide what they're going to do, but we provide a platform for that. So we are, for lack of a better term, Amazon for fintech. In other words, Jeff Bezos doesn't care what book you buy. He puts sellers of books together with buyers of books, and he makes a small percentage as the book goes through his platform, right?
Right.
We are a platform.
So earlier you were, and I didn't catch this the last time we talked.
Yeah.
In Venezuela, the government's going to crap, their currency's going down, or I'm sorry, their currency is extremely inflated.
Yes.
Or going through inflation. So if I'm in Venezuela right now and I buy 10 Bitcoin mining machines, at some point somebody tells me the cops come take my machines, right? But could somebody in Venezuela basically pay you to house their 50 machines or whatever, and they can still be miners, but with the safety of the US?
Yes. The last part. Most of our customers are from overseas. Mostly from Asia, they're not from South America. But it wouldn't surprise me if somebody from South America decided they wanted to host with us. Or Greece or anywhere else, right? Because they can put their computers here and cryptocurrency transfers around the world quite easily, right? You can transfer it via the internet, carry it around on your phone. Let's go to the next slide. So the way these things fit together is the mining operation is the creation of new cryptocurrency. But those people that create new currency, they have to trade it to get back into fiat. Because why? Because my power company won't accept cryptocurrency. So I have to get back into fiat so I can pay them dollars, right? So I need this spot trading. The derivatives are a futures contract. Let's forget about cryptocurrency for a minute. Just talk about corn, right? If you're a corn farmer and it's March and you're deciding whether to plant corn or wheat or soybeans, and let's say you decide on corn, and now you got to figure out, my gosh, I've got to buy fertilizer, I've got to buy fuel for my tractor, I've got to buy a tractor, I've got to pay for labor. I got all these expenses up front for corn that I'm not going to sell until July. Now, right now, corn's trading for $8 a bushel, and at $9 or $10 a bushel, I make a lot of money, but at $7 or $6 a bushel, I go bankrupt. What if I could have a contract today to sell that corn tomorrow at a guaranteed price of $8 a bushel so that I know I can lock in my profit? Now, if it's at 9, I'm going to leave some money on the table. But that's okay because I know I can get a guaranteed rate of return on my corn, right?
So you reduce the risk.
Reduce risk. Right? Some people call that hedging, right?
Well, that's what the commodities market does for the future.
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. Precisely. People that want to mine cryptocurrency have the exact same problem. Exact same problem. The Bitcoin they're going to produce 6 months from now, 9 months from now, 12 months from now, they have no earthly idea what Bitcoin's going to be traded in 9 or 12 months from now. So why not have a derivatives market where you can buy and sell futures contracts or options contracts that guarantee that you can sell that asset that you've then created for a guaranteed price at some point in the future? Yeah.
Been about 3 or 4 years heavily involved in options in the Chicago Board of Options Exchange. And I found the reason I quit is because there's man in the loop in that system. If it was just computers in the loop, I would have been fine. Mm-hmm. But you could tell it was being manipulated. Okay. Particularly in the last 15 minutes at the end of the day. It was just, over time I watched the pattern and it's built against you. The odds are not what you think they are. The house is crooked. Every market. I assume this one.
Not every market, but many of them are.
But as you're going down this road, if you're heavy there from the infrastructure, is it going to be computers in the loop or is there going to be people in the loop eventually?
So, not eventually, I would say from the instantiation of it. And the reason for that is, again, if you were going to build an exchange today, just like the dead presidents on pieces of paper we said the other day, you wouldn't build it with an open outcry pit, right? NASDAQ's never had an open outcry pit, right? It's been computers from day one. We're using their software. Now, that doesn't mean that computer code and trading collusion can't occur, but we're also using their trade practices surveillance system to ensure that that doesn't happen. And the restrictions from the CFTC are pretty strict. So, yeah, for those of you that want more information on that, you should read a book called Flash Boys, which is about the market manipulation, high frequency trading, that high frequency traders engage. You're 100% right. And finally, then the thing in the bottom right hand is custody or clearing. that holds on to those cryptocurrency that are pledged against contract during the duration of the contract. Can you go to the next slide, please? I'm going to go through these kind of quick because I've covered them all already. Mining is the creation of the coin. We host literally in this building 16,000 computers. That number is growing to 33,000 computers. Next slide, please. You are here, right? Which is where we're sitting. For those of you online that don't know where we're sitting, we grew about 50% quarter over quarter, and we expect to grow over 300% year over year at our current rate of growth. Not bad. We talked about the software.
Wish my company grew that fast.
I will tell you a funny story. The only thing that's hampered us in growing faster is availability of capital, right?
And your power supply, right? Or no?
No, actually, capital. I've got 23 megawatts online and running, and I've got another 23 megawatts feeder in. We're in the middle of raising capital so we can put in the fire suppression system and some of the other distribution stuff, but I can double in size in about 6 weeks as soon as we're done with our Series B. Okay?
Nice.
Which I think a similar story to I told you the last time you was here, but we now have term sheets from 2 groups, and so I think we'll be closing on the Series B in the next 2 weeks. So,
Congratulations.
Yeah, that'd be good. That's a lot of hard work and a long time coming. And I think this is all self-explanatory. But spot exchange is essentially what you do at the airport. You go there and you trade your dollars for euros. You go to Europe, spend your euros. You come back, you got a little bit of change in your pocket. You turn your change back into dollars when you come back into the country. That's a spot exchange. Next slide. I think in addition to that, you can't just like open your doors and like send money around the country. The government, various governments, state government, federal government, municipalities, they sort of frown on that, like to move millions of dollars around the country without at least telling them what you're doing. So you have to register with FinCEN at the federal level. You have to register with the comptroller of the currency at the federal level. You got to register with 50 different states. We're in the process of that, and much further along than we were, probably 2 or 3 months when we visited this last. Next slide. Derivatives exchange should open in first quarter of 2019. Next slide. And we finished our registration with the CFTC, again, on one of the other regulatory bodies, FinCEN, Comptroller of the Currency, and now CFTC. There's lots of regulators that are interested in what you're doing when you're moving money around, both internationally and nationally.
Now, on crypto derivatives, are you the only game in town, or do you have competitors on this?
No, CBOE, CBOT have contracts that you can now buy. We think that the contracts that they've got are a poor match for what the market needs. It would be as if you said, hey, we're going to have a corn futures contract without talking to the corn farmers about what they needed. They went out and they put a contract in place at the end of last year, about this time last year, in fact, without talking to any of the miners. And so it's what's called a dollar settled contract, that is a cash settled contract, which means that the difference between the strike price and the actual market price is where that contract settles at. So you get compensated in dollars, or you owe dollars at the end of that contract, which solves your monetary problem if you're a miner, but it doesn't solve the bigger problem of getting rid of the cryptocurrency and turning it back into fiat. A physically settled contract would do that, not a currency settled contract. And so our intention is to do a physically settled contract.
And since you have so many people mining, your customers could tell you what they really need when it comes down to the derivative.
Yeah,
as opposed to the other.
Weird, right? And here's the thing: CBOE, CBOT, they don't control any mining. We have one of the biggest mining operations in the world, so we think we have a better pulse on what's going on in that regard than they do, right? To start with. Yep, that's pretty much what we talked about. Next. And so from our standpoint, we looked at all of the other exchanges out there and what they do and don't do. CME, CBOE, there, see on the right. But there are other cryptocurrency exchanges out there. But as far as sort of the full stack, this is what we consider to be the full stack. We're the only game.
Are the other companies, are they all domestic or some foreign based?
No, some of them are. Most of the ones to the right of GDAX are overseas.
Okay.
In fact, if you read that New York Attorney General's,
To the left of GDAX are overseas.
yeah, everything this way from GDAX is overseas. Everything GDAX into the right is U.S. But if you look at the New York Attorney General's report that I was talking about, they do a good job of identifying who's U.S. based and who's not, and sort of who's following U.S. regulations and who isn't, who's partially following it, and where the holes they see on it. It's pretty good. It's a pretty good document from that standpoint. What I liked about it is it seemed to be a fairly ringing endorsement of what we're doing. Gotcha. This is the marketing guy. I'll take that. Next one. And so yeah, that's sort of where we're at now. Q3, Q4, at a very high level. So what we're doing with mining, spot, derivatives, clearing. So you said rapid growth. I said 6-year overnight wonders, right? The overnight wonder part is we were pre-revenue November of last year. We should do about $26 million this year. So that's not bad. From
bad.
Zero to that in like 9 months, something like that. So that's pretty cool. Next one. Got an amazing team. We, the founders of Because, realized that we had a lot of knowledge in IT security, data center management, et cetera. We also realized that we don't know jack about running financial markets. So we went to Chicago and we hired a bunch of people that know a lot about running financial markets. So we got a really good team there. Next slide. In fact, this guy was internal counsel of the Chicago Board of Trade for a long time. He was the past president of ICE Clear, and is literally in the Futures Industry Association Hall of Fame. Yeah, and the rest of the board. So it's a good team. Next, and yeah. So, and finally, next slide, disclaimer. Like,
You gotta read
everything I said there may be complete bullshit.
Is that that's the end of yours?
That's pretty much
Okay.
it.
So
Do you want to go through the tour?
Yeah, let's
Sure.
go through a tour. And so what we'll do is we'll start with the powering
Okay.
of the system.
So for those of you that are online and have access to Google Earth, you might want to choose, look up our facility, which is in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And I don't know if they've updated their satellite pictures or not, but you can see both the satellite pictures and you can see the videos that Chip shot.
Yep. So here are and I'm just gonna let this loop, I guess, but if you want to explain it as it goes along.
Sure. As soon as I can. So this is actually the substation that's right next door to our facility. We chose the building that we're in. One of the selection criteria was the access to sufficient power for what we wanted to do. We get a 23 megawatt feeder off, a 25 megawatt feeder off of that substation, and we get a 25 megawatt feed off of another substation that's the opposite direction. They're not redundant. We just feed half of the building with what we could get off of that facility, and then half the building with what we could get off the other facility. If you look at the back of the building, all the green boxes, those are all transformers that we've put in. Essentially, we built our own substation here. We take power from the electric company, what's called primary voltage. That means it comes into the building at 34,000 volts. And those transformers, we step it down from 34,000 volts to 480. And so if you would see on those placards out back of the building, those are all 34 kVA to 480. That 480 comes into the switchgear at the back of the building, where it's transferred to the, you can't really see them well, but these transformers up here, this transformers up in those racks take the 480 and transform it down to 208, which is what the computers digest. And then they take that electricity and they send it down to this switchgear. So it goes transformer, switchgear, transformer, switchgear. From this switchgear here, it goes into the computers.
And I have the next slide is the box is open, I believe, with the transformer, so you can see them.
Okay. And so what you'll see in the back of the building is essentially that we took a beer warehouse and turned it into a data center. mostly because of its proximity to power, but also because of square footage that was available. And so you see like literally racks and racks and racks of computers. Now what we do is we build a modular setup. So every module is we call a pod. Each row is made of 2 pods. Each row has about 2,200 computers in it. And you can just see in this sort of walking shot where it's just row after row after row. Right now we've got 7 rows operational. We've got an 8th row built out. We've got 9th and 10th row at about 30 and 50% of constructed capability. When we're done with row 10, we'll have capacity for 22,000.
So I think this was the one that you were in progress of building, right? Those are the transformers?
Yeah, you may in fact find it is in the same condition. We've been out raising money, so we haven't been doing any new construction since then. But yeah, that's a transformer, one of those 480 to 208 transformers. You can see how the cables come down into the distribution box, or distribution panels. And
There's a problem with the computer, or do you do the maintenance, or does the customer do all of that?
no, that's part of the service we provide customers. So we do all of the installation, maintenance, monitoring, all of that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Might not be able to answer this, but your ultimate out, going public, selling to a major financial institution that gets the memo, this is the way to go.
I think that's probably it. I think that there are a number of financial institutions, NASDAQ, Goldman, Fidelity, Japan Next, ICE, that grow through acquisition.
Yep.
And if we, and their growth through acquisition strategy is really smart because they don't have to take any of the early risk.
Right.
They just figure out who wins and then they buy them.
Yep.
Right. So it's incumbent on us to be one of the winners. That they go, oh, we want to buy these guys because well, they're one of the winners, right? So
Gotcha.
yeah. So if there is an exit strategy, it's much more likely, I think, that we'll sell out than that we'll take it public.
Right. Gotcha. Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so is there any other stuff on the power that you wanted to go over?
No, I don't think so.
So far, I'm not seeing any questions, so let me stop share. And we'll go to heat. This is the fun part.
Yeah, so this is the fun part. So for those of you that are local, not on the internet, you may find, and frankly, if you're on the internet, if you want some laughs, you can go to Wavy TV10 80 Fox, and you can find out that last month for about 3 weeks, he was running a piece a week on sort of how we were disturbing our neighbors by generating so much noise. You'll see these types of fans are called tube axial fans. Each one of those fans moves about 40,000, 45,000 cubic feet a minute of air, and we've got about 130 of those on the roof. Literally, I've got a forest of fans on the roof, which has its own sort of structural mechanical problems associated with it because we had to reinforce the structure of the building. So while this was once a beer warehouse, the bones of this building have been significantly upgraded. It is now more of a bunker than it is a beer warehouse. But we put all the fans on the roof. That's from inside a pod looking up. You can see that it's pulling the air essentially through the computers. We've got what's called hot row, cold row containment, so that all of the computers exit inward, and then that hot air is then sucked up and out of the building.
And when you're standing in that room, what is it, like 130? Or
It's about 130, 135 degrees.
Yeah. Even with that much airflow. I was amazed at how hot it was.
Yeah, it generates quite a bit of heat. Because why? Well, we're in the business of turning 23 megawatts of electricity into heat and doing some amount of useful calculation work associated with it along the way. What you're seeing there, these are the individual computers and the power supplies.
And they got fans on both sides. One's
They
pulling in,
do.
one's
They
pushing
pull
out.
the air in. It's a push-me-pull-you effect thing where they pull air in, blow it across the boards, and then suck it out of the machine. Right?
You could be doing hot water for 2 square miles.
We could. It's funny you mentioned that because the city's been very cooperative in working with us, very helpful. And for those of you that know where we're at, right across the road, there's a fairly sizable lake. And one of the folks, I forget, economic development or city council or whatever, was trying to be helpful. And they're like, hey, you could do a water cooling. You could just run pipes under the road. You could
use the lake over there to dissipate heat. I was like, yeah, and after about 2 hours, we'd have created the world's largest bowl of soup. You know, because we would keep that entire lake up, in my estimation, in about 2 hours.
The environmentalists that went crazy.
Yeah.
Hot tub, Virginia Beach hot tub. I see a side business.
It's a side business.
There'd be a lot of dead fish in that thing.
Yeah. So there's, we did the calculations when we designed the facility. We need about 700,000 tons of AC if we were to air condition it. So ambient cooling is the only way to be sort of price competitive with our customer. We need about $2 or $3 million worth of AC, which would increase the price I'd have to charge my customers for the capex recapture. So anyway, you can see it's there, rows and rows of computers.
And how many of that's, you call that a pod, right? It's got two sides.
So in one of these frames, there's about 96 computers. Each pod has 6 of those frames per side, so it's about 554 or something like that computers per side. There's 2 sides, so there's about 1,100 computers per pod, and then there's 2 pods per row, so there's like 2,200 computers per row. So I know those numbers weren't exactly, like if you were doing the math in your head, you're like, he doesn't even know the numbers. I look them up when I need them, but it's essentially 1,100, 2,200, about 500%, 550%.
I think we're going on the roof here in a second.
Okay.
So why Virginia Beach?
That's a really good question. We get asked that a lot. There was a group of us about 6 years ago that were funded by the Hampton Roads Community Foundation called the Entrepreneurship Study Group. There's about 20 of us that met consistently for about 18 months to figure out what the strategy for the area should be to diversify the income away from defense and tourism, and how we could stop the brain drain and create cool jobs that were attractive so that our best and brightest would not only not move away, but that we could attract some of the best and brightest from other areas. So I started it because with about 4 or 5 other people. A guy named Gary Warren started a company called IV Watch, and a guy named David Wolf started Lisa Mattresses. Now you might say, well, Lisa Mattresses, that doesn't sound very high tech. But the reality is they never touched the mattresses. The reality is they outsourced the production of those mattresses. And what they actually are is a really good e-commerce company where they do online marketing, online advertising. They know their numbers really well, and then they take that and turn that into sales, and they outsource. So if you order a mattress online for them, you order it from Lisa. The order goes directly to the fulfillment center. They manufacture the mattress. Lisa never takes ownership of the mattresses. The fulfillment center ships the mattress to you. Lisa just did the marketing, the design, and took your money, which is great. And they're local, and they're like the 2nd largest seller of mattresses in the United States now. And they've done that in 6 years. Right?
You mentioned equivalent human capital. It appears to me that that's probably one of the most amazing things about your business is the amount of talent that you got to have here that crosses many different disciplines. What's your...
Yeah, but if you think about those disciplines, they're all highly compensated disciplines. I'm not creating a whole industry of maids and butlers and concierges. I'm creating a whole industry of people in the fintech space that have financial engineering backgrounds and have IT engineering backgrounds. With highly compensated jobs, highly skilled professionals, the kind of people you can build an economy around.
Is the local colleges stepping up to create a pipeline for people like that? Is this a plan?
On the IT standpoint, Hampton Roads has always had a great IT pipeline. In fact, I've heard the statistic that we're the #6 provider of talent to Silicon Valley. A lot of people go to ODU, which I think is ranked 17th as far as the computer science department. And when they graduate from the computer science department at ODU, they go to Research Triangle, Northern Virginia, New York City, or Silicon Valley. What we're trying to do is keep some of that talent here. The other thing that's true is for us of a certain age that have kids at college age, my last daughter, my youngest daughter just graduated college in May. But for those of us around my age, a lot of times we send our kids to Virginia, Virginia Tech, VCU, George Washington, George Mason. Or in my case, my daughters have gone to University of Utah, University of Central Florida. And what happens is they don't come back. So we're literally in the business of exporting our best and brightest, which in an environment where you're in a war for brains is the stupidest strategy you could possibly engage in, right? And so 6 years ago, we identified that as a problem, and about 20 of us sat down and we said, how are we going to fix the problem? We said, we're going to build some businesses here that are of a type that would be attractive to people in the computer sciences, financial services, et cetera. Come on, grab a seat. So does that answer your question? But that's why Virginia. I could have done it in Pennsylvania. We
The
could
good
have done
story,
it in Mongolia, but I raised my kids here and we wanted to fix the local economy.
it's a shame the local media won't pick up on stories like that.
No, but we make too much noise and they'll pick up on it. True statement.
So how many,
But here's the funny story. Let me come back to that, because here's what happened. I would challenge you, go to Andy Fox's Wavy TV 10, his Facebook feed, and just read through the comments on the news story. They broke 3-1 in our favor.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so people were like, hey, then what did the neighbors expect when they live right on the edge of a place that's zoned industrial? Literally, the way this place is zoned, I can do everything but put up a smokestack and smelt steel. But other than that, the way this is zoned, I can do like pretty much anything else. Now, outside of that, and the fact that there's like a train, the light railroad to run through their side yard, and the fact that they've got an electrical tower in their side yard. So on some level you go, well, why did you have an expectation that it would be quiet? But this place was vacant for almost 2 years. And so if I were them, I'd be sort of disappointed too. From their perspective, they were like living on the edge of a park that one day grew up and became a data center. So we're still working that way through that with the neighbors, and I think we'll be able to accommodate them. We just had an engineering study done. I haven't got the results of it yet of how we can mitigate some of the noise. But you're 100% right. It would be really nice if the media would do positive stories, not just about us, but about all the companies that are doing way cool stuff in Hampton Roads, so that people were like, oh, there's some amazing stuff happening here. I mean, did you guys know about Lisa Mattresses before I mentioned it? Or did you know about IV Watch before I mentioned it? I mean, there's some amazing stuff going on here outside of what we're doing with cryptocurrency, and people are unaware. Why? Because, well, the media doesn't cover that. They cover when you're making too much noise. It's a little bit ludicrous.
so how many jobs do you project?
I think right now we employ 35 people in all aspects of our business, not just in mining. And I think that number probably goes to about 100 by the end of the year, assuming we close on the Series B pretty quick. Most of those folks will be employed in the spot exchange side of the business. Right now, we're probably manned almost as much as we need to be to double in size. Sean will have kittens when I say this, but we could probably double the number of computers that we have back there, and we probably wouldn't have to add a lot of people, maybe 6 or 7. But on the financial services side, on the spot exchange side, we would add a lot of people pretty quick, I think, once we're funded. So maybe 100 people by the end of the year. Wow. Yeah. Now think about the type of jobs that is, right? It's market makers, financial engineers, people that really it's HR people, it's accounting people. Again, it's the type of jobs that you want to create and build an economy around. Yep. It's the statistics right now is that for every high-tech job that you create 10 other jobs in support services, right? Right. So this is, my criticism of our regional economic development strategy has been as follows. We have always thought it was a win. There are 2 types of wins here. If you get Lidl or Aldi's or Target or Best Buy or Walmart to put a store here, we thought that was a win, right? Because you get to create like 100 minimum wage jobs and then extract capital from the area forever and send it to Bentonville, Arkansas. Right. The types of businesses that the entrepreneurship study group came up with, the profile we were after, was companies that would sell the lion's share of whatever their product, their good, or their service was someplace else and bring that money back to Hampton Roads, where it would go into Hampton Roads Bank, and where Hampton Roads banks would then be able to make loans from that money, and where we would spend it into the local economy. So at one point, when we were in the throes of construction, I think we had 50 to 75 people in the trades back there, electricians, mechanical engineers, people doing mechanical stuff, putting in the racks, reinforcing the roof. I mean, we were doing like a lot of work in this building. We spent like $12 million in 6 months. Well, those guys, many of them, lived in the local economy. And they bought groceries, and they bought gasoline, and they paid for haircuts, and so on. And then the barbers and the people who worked at the grocery store and so on, they did the same thing. And so what happens from an economic standpoint, you call it the velocity of money, where money gets spent and respent and respent and respent in the economy. When you do that, that money gets respent in the local economy 10 times in a year. So while we may bring in $20 million this year, if that gets respent in the local economy 10 times, that's like, and that has a force multiplier effect of like bringing in almost $250 million into the local economy, right? And then if we create 100 jobs, and what I told you is true, where for every high-tech job, high-paying job, you create 10 other jobs, that would be like the effect of creating 1,000 other jobs, right? So that's what has me excited about why we're here in Virginia. To give you a really, really longer answer than we ever possibly wanted, right? But that's why we did what we did. That's why we're here. That's why we're not in Pennsylvania, why we're not in Mongolia, but why we're here. Right?
So one other thing, because entrepreneurs will be watching this video, especially CEOs. Is there room? I mean, I know you would love to be the biggest, but is there room in other people in other states, other countries, that they could set up a similar business model? I mean, is the crypto market going to be big enough that this is going to be a thing?
As big as we are, we're probably 1% of the worldwide mining for just Bitcoin, not even Bitcoin Cash or any of the other. We've been told we're the largest in North America and the top 5 in the world, right? If that's true, and I think it is, and we're only 1%, it's a very diffuse thing right now, with a lot of people around the world engaging in. I can't tell you how many people have come to us and said, hey, we saw your article in the Wall Street Journal. Could we come and tour your facility? Because we got a facility in Atlanta or Oregon where we were hosting like 500 machines, and we'd like to learn from you. We've hosted half a dozen of those people over the last 6 months who just want to come in and figure out what we're doing. And we've been glad to help them out. I mean, one of the things that's nice in the cryptocurrency space, nicer than other spaces, I would say, is that the pie is growing so fast that no one feels that they have to sort of hold on to their slice, because if I give you a piece of your slice, then suddenly my slice is smaller. What's happened is that the pie is growing so fast that people don't really have sort of a I got mine type of mentality. So it's been really actually very fun industry to, because frankly, 6 years ago when we were newbies, a lot of people reached out to us and were like, oh, here's how this works, or here's how this works, or you gotta look up this resource or whatever. And so we try and sort of pay it forward a little bit. Very cool.
Okay, let me, I'll reshare the video real quick, and then we can start.
Okay.
In a moment. All right, so the next few are going to be the roofs.
So we talked about the forest of fans on the roof. It's a little bit hard to see it because I think Chip must have been holding the camera over his head, but these sort of aqua colored tubes are 9 feet tall, and they're about this big around. So you don't get a sense of scale there for how big they are, but they're big, and there's a bunch of them. And they do make noise, but we move about 3.5 million cubic feet a minute, and the exhaust air is about 135 degrees. So if anybody hears about a great use of low temperature air, I want to be able to sort of monetize that, because right now it's just exhausting it as a business guy. It drives me a little bit crazy. And frankly, you guys don't know me, but my background is as a Lean Six Sigma black belt. I'm an efficiency expert, and as an efficiency expert, it actually hurts my feelings to be doing that. So we've been thinking about like, well, what if we could partner with somebody who does dried fruit, and we got like 45,000 square feet here. We could just put in racks of fruit, and we could just dry it for whoever. We just blow 135 degree air through it. We thought about doing hot yoga. We thought about a whole bunch of things. But there's got to be something we can do with 135-degree air that would be more useful than just heating up Virginia Beach.
At least your neighbors don't have to worry about snow anytime soon. I
I don't
imagine the heat plume above this place is
Well,
huge.
yeah, it's funny you should say that, because when we were building it, I made the comment to somebody, I didn't think it would ever rain or snow in this building again. But it doesn't affect the rain at all. It still rains in the building. Much to my disappointment, I was actually, because the way in which we pull air in has a tendency to entrain water from time to time, entrain air, and I prefer that it didn't. So if it wasn't
Right.
raining on the building, that would be better.
Right. So the next few are going to be the expansion areas.
Yeah. I'm thinking actually, I'm having current conversations with solar providers about them putting a solar farm up on the roof. We think we can do about 1.5 megawatts of solar up there. We've got almost 2 acres of roof space, which is like, even as I say that, it's sort of a ludicrous thing to say. I've got 2 acres of roof. It's absurd. Anyway.
Okay. Any more questions on the heat or anything before we go to the next thing? All right. Stop share. Can't believe this is actually working. I gave my chance like 50% odds here. Oop. Second. Share. Okay, so now we're going to get into the mining machines themselves.
So the computers themselves are these little things that are like 6 inches by 6 inches by 18 inches deep. In every one of those computers, what it does, now granted, your computer at your desk can do lots of different things. So these things only do one thing, but they do that one thing really, really fast. Each one of those computers is probably 1,000 times faster than your computer. Wow. At doing Bitcoin mining. I can't run games, I can't run spreadsheets, it won't do anything else. But Bitcoin mining, it does that really, really fast. Wow. Now, those computers then all have to speak to a network, because they sort of get the problem that they're working on from the network, and then when they've got a solution, they send it back to the network. So you would think with that many computers that we would use a lot of bandwidth, but the reality is we don't use nearly as much as at least I would have thought.
What about the pool that you use? Are you creating your own pool?
We haven't yet, but we have talked about doing that. Right now, our customers use whatever pool they want to use. Some use slush pool, some use ant pool. Yeah, and we don't really care, because again, we're not really in that business. We're sort
They
of
own the ASIC miner, or you own the miners?
no, our customers own it. They own it. They buy them, they supply them, and we install them.
In a minute, also, I took some video of the video card.
Okay, so Tom, what happens if Category 5 hurricane comes through and demolishes this place?
I don't care. I've got bigger problems with cats.
It's called insurance, right?
Well, no, I was actually part of Hurricane Andrew relief effort down in Miami when Hurricane Andrew hit. And I looked all the way through Holiday Inn because it essentially blew the guts out of it, and all that was left essentially was cement slabs. So our building here is about, because it's all loading dock, is about 4 feet above grade, and grade's about 8 feet above sea level. If Hurricane Florence had come through, and there was a very real possibility of that, and a much more realistic scenario is getting Cat 1 hurricane through here, or Cat 2 hurricane through here. I mean, what was the one that hit Franklin? Isabel? Isabel and Florence have been, Isabel hit us, Florence came close. If we were hit by a Cat 1 hurricane, we would probably just shut down for about 48 hours. That's sort of, we were making this crap up in real time as we were looking at the Hurricane Florence sort of track. And Sean and I were sitting around and going, I don't know, what do you want to do? I don't know, what do you want to do? Should we shut down? Should we reduce operations? How do we shut down the fans? Do we leave the fans running, but shut the computers down? We really hadn't figured that out until we were forced to figure it out. So, but what we did figure is that we'd probably shut down about 8 hours before it made landfall, and we'd stay shut down for about 2 days, and then we'd come back up. Was what we planned to do. Now, that assumes we have electricity.
Right.
But we are right next to a substation. So I got to believe that as big a customer as we are, and our proximity to a substation mitigates in our favor.
Right.
But there's no telling, right? And we would just deal with whatever we had. I was more concerned with water infiltration, water entrainment, and flying debris damage, because we've carved out large sections of the walls that used to be concrete block and are now sort of louvers, so for airflow. And so the walls are more susceptible, I think, to the damage due to flying debris than they were when they were concrete block, and nobody would care, right? So just the things that you deal with.
If you shut down, do your customers have a contingency plan where they can still operate?
We aren't a data center in the traditional sense of like if I'm operating a data center for a bank and if I shut down, they can't process transactions. We are a data center in the sense of our customers are running money printing presses where they're turning electricity into money. And if I had to shut down, they would no longer be turning electricity into money. Contractually, we have some latitude with our customers in doing that type of thing. We just try and stay up and running as much as we can because otherwise our customers go find other data centers that can do a better job.
At what point do they stop becoming profitable? And what Bitcoin price drops? You know, where does the
right now the break-even point looks to be about $4,500 a Bitcoin, at least at our cost of electricity. So at $6,500, folks should still be making some money. Frankly, I think too little has been appreciated about the exchange price of Bitcoin and the market clearing price of what mining costs. But I think there's a very strong correlation between those two things. And so I think that it actually makes the future price of Bitcoin much more predictable than you would think. Just for those of you that think you have, or that are in business and think you have to get a return on capital pretty quickly, think of the next time you're worried about that, I want you to think in terms of miners. Typically, the rate at which a miner produces Bitcoin decays by about 8% per month. So you really have to sort of make your money back in about 8 months on a compounded basis, and you make your profit in about 10 months, and after 10 months, your miners obsolete. So it's a very rapid obsolescence path. Now, that's been true up to current. The state of the art, the best computers that mankind can make right now are 7-nanometer fabs, and that's the next generation of miners. The 7-nanometer miners. Once we're there, there's no technology behind it that makes that obsolete. So it's likely that that generation of miners will have much longer life expectancy than previous versions of miners. So,
well, the difficulty goes up as more miners come online.
it does.
And so the 7-nanometer or not, at some point it will reach there is a diminishing return. So it will come to zero at some point.
It'll come to break even, but not to zero. That's sort of the market thing. Because what happens, forgetting about mining for a minute, let's talk about gold mining rather than Bitcoin mining. Now, if gold mining today yields you an ounce of gold for $1,200, right? How much gold will you mine if the cost to mine it costs you $900? And then you can sell it for $1,200. The answer is as much as I can do. Right? On the other hand, if it costs you $1,400 to mine that same ounce of gold, how much gold would you mine? The answer is none. I'd shut down, right? Mm-hmm. So the supply and demand always come into balance over time, or that's sort of Adam Smith's invisible hand of the market at work, right? In Bitcoin mining, it's the same thing, right? As we get closer and closer to the market clearing price, it'll squeeze out the less efficient players, right? Until you get to the people that are as efficient. Now, what happens when somebody gets squeezed out and they got to shut down because they're not as efficient? Within 10 minutes, the network adjusts to the difficulty factor.
That's true.
And suddenly, if you weren't profitable before, now you are a little bit more profitable because somebody else got squeezed out and you were more efficient. This market, the cryptocurrency market, because it's all automated, is brutally efficient. mean, literally, there's no other market that adjusts within 10 minutes like that on a global scale that I'm aware of. It's brutally efficient. We're not probably the most efficient miners in the world, but when you add on, not only are we pretty good, but also we're in the US, we got rule of law, transparency, property rights versus Inner Mongolia. Our customers come here for those things because they recognize that those things also have some amount of value, right? And so I compete with global folks, not just on a basis of I'm not just Kmart. I can afford to be Nordstrom's. Right?
Now, do any of these machines, are they able to be recycled? Because that's a heck of a obsolescence period. That's a lot of
Yeah,
machines.
boat anchors. They get recycled as boat anchors. I have no idea, honestly. They're stealing them and rare earth metals and so on, but I'm unaware that like Bitmain will buy them back for us and then recycle the stuff in them. But probably.
A lot of that's aluminum, right?
I think the chassis is aluminum. Yeah.
Right.
So if you got one of you guys wants to start a business recycling used miners, I can give you like thousands a month of fans, power supplies, miners.
Well, there is the idea that, and it is the part I believe, you mine it even when it's unprofitable, because I'm not worried about the return today when I know that when 21 million Bitcoins have been mined, there are no more, and there's only one place where there's no more supply. The only one place the price will go if it continues to be used.
Yeah, now the 21 million is not the number you should focus on. Because 21 million is 100 years from now. The number you should focus on is 17 million today and producing 10 an hour, 10 every 10 minutes, 12 and a half every 10
I thought it was 2020 we divide again in 2020. But
that's when we get to the halving, right? We go from 12 and a half to 6.25, right? But that geometric decay, 100 years.
Is it really?
Yeah, but that's why I said earlier that essentially the supply is fixed today. We're at 17 million and we're gonna be 17 million.
Yeah, and I questioned that when you said it, because I thought it was
No, I promise you, it doesn't. And that's why sort of you have to sort of think of that fact and the fact that cryptocurrency is divisible, Bitcoin is divisible down to 8 decimal places, right? Because a lot of people are like, man, it's so expensive, it's $6,500, I can't get involved. I'm like, you don't have to spend $6,500, buy $100 worth of Bitcoin. You're like, I can do that? Yeah, it's like 0.00002 Bitcoin. You can get, right? And so the point of that is, this is, I think we're near, we got any more videos?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna leave you with this. Because earlier I said, what if Bitcoin market cap got up to the price of gold? And then I said, what if Bitcoin market cap got up to the price of the dollar in terms of parity market cap? The last thing I'll leave you with is what if one Satoshi, which is the point with 7 zeros and a 1 Satoshi, because it's divisible down to 8 decimal places, got to the value of a penny. If that happens, the value of Bitcoin is something like $1.5 trillion. No, I'm sorry.
That's the market cap.
1.5 quadrillion. Wow. Right. So, yeah, the market cap of it. Now you say, well, that's a fantastic. Well, when would that happen? When could that happen? What if it not just replaced the dollar? What if it just became the de facto currency system of the planet? So, I don't know what the future happens. I said earlier, I don't know if it's Alta Vista or Google, but what I do know is that there's a lot of utility and a lot of upside potential for it. That's sort of the way we think about it. Any other questions? Okay.
So the next setup, the other machines were a single-use machine. This is the rack.
Those are all, the ones we showed you to this point are all for mining Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, and maybe like Litecoin or 1 or 2 others that are based on SHA-256. Ethereum's based upon a different protocol, and a lot of other cryptocurrencies are knockoffs of Ethereum. And so people mine those using graphical processing units, which are more general processing. Like you could go home and mine other cryptocurrencies with your computer at home today, right? In fact, if you want to do your homework, go to minergate.com, minergate.com, And you could just set it up, go to the website and start mining some cryptocurrency on your laptop or desktop at home tonight, just to be like more familiar with it. If you're like, well, we saw this crazy guy today, and I'll give it a shot. You won't make a whole lot of money really fast, but you'll make some money. And some people have elected to buy a whole bunch of graphics cards and a whole bunch of computers and sort of engage in that endeavor sort of on a more industrial scale, certainly on a more commercial scale.
It's one of the benefits because you could switch currencies. If one goes up, one goes down, you could switch.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's exactly right. And these guys, our customers, have software where the computers just automatically do that for them.
Wow. Interesting. So I think this is where this is where your dead machines are.
This is the machine graveyard, yeah. Because of dust, because of humidity, because of heat, we have a tendency to always be in the business of fixing machines.
And that's one of the services you provide is if it's just a fan dead, your team can replace the fan, put the machine back in.
Fans, power supplies, and a few other repairs where we can get spare parts. It's surprisingly difficult to get certain repair parts from the manufacturer.
And then there's the inside.
And so this is all heat sinks and various mining boards, right? So we slide it in, blow heat or blow air across them to keep them as cool as possible.
Let's see. Yeah, okay. Let's go ahead and move on to the next video. So this is the network that's bringing in the bandwidth.
Yeah, so
1 second, let me
down here.
share this real quick.
Okay.
Share. All right.
So down here we've got multiple connections to the internet. We have three connections with CenturyLink. One that goes from here to DC, one that goes from here to Research Triangle. And we've got one that exists today. We're not really using it. That goes from here to Chicago. And then we've got a backup circuit with Verizon. So the idea is just to make sure that if a carrier or somebody with a forklift or whatever tries to take us down, that's as hard as possible, because while a hurricane blows through and takes their power away, and our customers might be okay with that, it is less likely that they'd be okay with us saying, I don't know, something wrong with the network. And so we've got redundant connections to the internet to try and prevent that. What you're seeing there is just their equipment. Now that bundle there is the fiber optic cable that runs in from the various miners. We aggregate that. So I want you to think about this for a minute. Sean's team runs a network with 16,000 plus endpoints. It's one of the biggest networks in the Commonwealth. It's comparable to a network that you would see on a college campus, right? With 16,000 endpoints, or maybe like Newport News Shipbuilding or an enterprise of sort of that level, because with 16,000 endpoints, it's a big network. Now the difference is our network is extremely homogeneous, right? It's as homogeneous as we could possibly make it. So I don't have anybody using sort of Apple computers or Windows 95 on my network.
Okay, so this is going to take you through the components.
Yeah, we could go through it if you want. It's not terribly interesting. High-speed switch there. Go forward a little bit more. Computers that sort of room the network. I mentioned earlier the computers that would run the spot exchange. Those are these here. They're a little bit different situation now than when you took the video a couple weeks ago. But that's the computer server room. Now, for the data center, we don't run backup power, we don't run backup generators, we don't run air conditioning. First of all, the miners are more robust than the typical computer, and B, our customers generally don't want to pay for that additional sort of resilience, would increase the price I have to charge them. In the computer room, though, we run all of the things that you would normally see in a data room. There's redundant air conditioning units, battery backups, generator, electrical generator, all the stuff that you typically see.
All right, ready for the next video? Yeah. We're moving on to the command center here. Just a second. Or at least I call it the command center. We'll see what you
We call it mission control.
Mission control, that sounds cool. Okay, 1 moment.
It's my NASA background.
All right.
There's Sean. Hey, how can you be in two places at once? So, so this is a room we call machine control. It's separate from this room, sits up the stairs over there. And this is all software that Sean and his team have written that we use to monitor the status of computers. How much work they're doing, how hot they are, how much air we're moving, what the status of the machines are. We've written software that will automatically shut down computers if they get too hot and then recycle them. We have written software that when you just plug a computer in, it goes out, announces to the network, hey, I'm here, and the network tells it how to configure itself so that Sean's team can literally configure 300 or 400 machines in a shift. And so the idea was to be as manpower efficient as we could be to keep costs as low as possible. And so right now, Sean's staff is about 1 person per 1,000 computers. When I was at NASA, we staffed at about 1 person for 110 computers. So we're at least 8 times more efficient on a manpower basis than we were when I was running.
The other thing that was really interesting is you were operating at 92 degrees, and I was like, normal people think computers they need to be air conditioned, all that. So what's your limitations on?
Well, we're 92 degrees, but you also notice our peak is not 195, we're 156. So we've lost about 15 to 20% of computers at that point,
right?
That turn themselves off to thermal protection. If we have perfect airflow, we could run all the way up to about 95 degrees. It's imperfections in airflow that cause hotspots and cause some of the machines to shut down.
That makes sense. Out of that whole rack with thousands, there's one that's getting more air than the other.
Yep,
where
that's
they are.
exactly what it is. So you get like short circuits of air. In other words, like up at the top where the exhaust fans are, they're pulling air through the upper computers to a greater degree than they're pulling air through the lower computers because it short circuits a little bit. And so typically what we see on, and I don't know if you took a video of this on the video of mission control, but again, our team's written software that allows to see the temperature of the individual computers and of the rows. And when you look at a view of it, you can see where sort of the lower left-hand and lower right-hand lobe of a rack are a bit hotter in the center and the upper areas of the rack.
And then your customers get to pick where their computer goes?
No, it's sort of a random walk.
I did take the video of the hatch rate one. We didn't look at the temperature one, I believe. So we're going to be there just a second.
But if you were to say pull up block or Bitcoin.com and compare our hash rate to them, I mean, I think we're about, if all of our hash rate were on Bitcoin.com, we'd be about half of their pool capacity in terms of hash rate.
Yeah, so here's the side with the hatch rate.
Yeah, so as an example, you can see pod 7, this rack was on that day experiencing, I think we had a fan out, was experiencing some heat related issues, right? So we're able to see graphically how many machines are running in a particular rack or set of racks, and where Sean needs to deploy his team to do repairs or whatever. So we've automated the analytics as much and data visualization as much as we could to make our work as efficient as possible. It's sort of it's a matter of self-defense when you're dealing with 16,000 computers and you got 4 people on a shift to figure out sort of where to deploy them most effectively.
So the next 2 are security. I'm not sure if you want to get into that or not.
No, we just this is not your father's beer warehouse. It's just we run a lot of layers of security here because armed people showed up in Canada and tried to force the staff to mine Bitcoin for them. And we said, well, if people out there have that mentality, we're going to try and make it hard for them, as hard as we can.
All right, so last video we have is talking about a little bit about the room that you have to grow, because there's a lot of empty space in the warehouse.
There is. Fruit drawings.
So
Well, the reason I say it that way is because, well, he's right. There's a lot of room here. We have like 86,000 square feet in the main building and another 25,000 square feet in the outbuilding. So we're like 110,000 square feet total. We will only ever occupy about 45,000 square feet because of the power density of the machines. I can only get about 50 megawatts here from Dominion Power. And with 50 megawatts, I can only power about 35,000 machines, 32,000 machines. So we will always have leftover space from the standpoint of the data center. Now, could we park mobile homes in there and then use that as a call center or use that as market operations or something like that? Could we find uses for that space? Maybe, but again, I can't get very much power. So whatever else I put in there, it can't use much additional power.
So back to dried fruit.
So back to dried fruit. We've actually talked about using it for people to store their boats in the off season, right? When you winterize your boats.
Big revenue generator there.
I don't know about big, but there's not a lot of overhead, so it shouldn't be.
No, it's a good area.
Smithfield, you can make a lot of jerky with all that hay.
Yes, so dried fruit, dried beef, you know, all of those things.
So some of this is the shipping
Yeah,
and
it's
receiving.
shipping and receiving area, right, where we get computers in or sending them out for repairs.
For those kind of modifications to the building, did you have to buy them?
No, but when you tell somebody you're gonna make $12 million of improvement to their $4 million building. So yeah, we negotiated with the landlord, and at the end of the day, they kindly allowed us to upgrade their building significantly. Just as an example, and you didn't see this, or you wouldn't see this in the data center. We talked about how much weight we put up on the roof. Well, the original roof wasn't built to support that kind of weight. Like each of those fans is like 2,000 pounds. There's like 130 of them, so we had like 26 tons to more, 130 tons to the roof. So there's a big beam that runs the spine of that building. It's a 2 feet by 2 feet concrete and rebar beam that forms the spine of the building. The structural engineers told us it's not strong enough. So we had these guys come in and wrap it in graphite epoxy, and apparently, I've been told, increase the strength of that beam by 300%. And then they came to us and said, oh, and by the way, you're going to have to buy these really big structural I-beams, and then you're going to have to like dig up your foundation and like, bury this stuff in there. So we put like literally thousands of dollars into like tens of thousands of dollars into structural improvements to the building. I mean, I put in, I don't know, a quarter-mile road behind the building. Stuff that where when you're financing a business like that, you never think, oh, I got to spend money for a road. But the problem was we had a 200-foot crane in the back of the building back in like January, February when the ground was wet, and we sunk it up to its axles. So they were like, yeah, we'll come back when you build a road back there. We can't support the road. Okay, we'll do that. So we put a road, stuff like that. Anything else?
Very interesting.
Cool. I think we're done.
I think we're good.
Shit.
Well, thank you so much for having us over here.
Thank
And,
you.
Any questions from our viewers?
Nope.